Before we dive into this tale, please hit that subscribe button to join our storytelling community and never miss a chapter of these gripping narratives. I've been the blacksmith of this small town for over 30 years, my hammer striking iron in a rhythm as steady as my heartbeat. The forge's glow has been my constant companion, its heat a comfort against the chill of lonely nights. Folks here know me as the quiet man, the one who fixes their tools and shoes their horses without much talk. My shop sits at the edge of town, where the road fades into the forest, a place where secrets can hide. I never sought company, content with the clang of metal and the crackle of fire. But life has a way of disrupting even the most solitary existence. One stormy evening, as rain battered the roof, a knock came at my door. It was faint, hesitant, but urgent. I opened it to find a woman, drenched and shivering, her white dress muddied and torn. She looked at me with eyes full of fear and whispered, "Please, I need shelter." I stood frozen, my hands still blackened from the day's work, unsure of what to make of her. Her dress, though ruined, was unmistakably a wedding gown, its lace edges frayed like her composure. She didn't belong here, not in my world of soot and iron. I ushered her inside, the fire casting long shadows as she stepped into the dim light. Her name, she said, was Eliza, and she'd fled from a life she couldn't bear. I didn't ask for details. I've learned that questions invite burdens. Instead, I offered her a blanket and a seat by the forge. Her presence felt like an intrusion, yet something in her trembling hands stirred a forgotten part of me. The storm raged on outside, and I knew she couldn't leave. So I let her stay, unaware that my quiet life was about to unravel. The next morning, the town buzzed with whispers of a missing bride. I heard them through the open window as I worked, the gossip drifting in like smoke. Eliza stayed hidden in the back room, her eyes darting to every sound outside. I told her to keep out of sight. I didn't need trouble with the townsfolk. My forge was my sanctuary, and I guarded it fiercely. But as I hammered, I caught glimpses of her watching me, her gaze curious yet guarded. She asked about my work, her voice soft but probing, as if seeking a distraction. I answered curtly, focusing on the glowing iron. Yet, her questions lingered, chipping away at the walls I'd built. By noon, I realized I hadn't heard the town's usual rhythm. Something was shifting, and it started with her. Days passed, and Eliza became a shadow in my shop, silent but ever-present. I gave her small tasks, sweeping the floor, sorting nails, to keep her busy. She worked without complaint, though her hands were unaccustomed to labor. I noticed the way she studied the tools, as if memorizing their shapes. At night, she'd sit by the fire, staring into the flames, lost in thoughts she didn't share. I didn't pry. My own past taught me the value of silence. But the townsfolk grew restless, their searches for the runaway bride inching closer to my door. I started locking it at night, something I'd never done before. Each creak of the floorboards made me tense, wondering if they'd come for her. Still, I kept her secret, though I didn't know why. One evening, Eliza spoke more than usual, her words spilling out like water from a cracked dam. She told me of a fiancé she despised, a man whose wealth masked cruelty. Her escape was impulsive, driven by fear rather than courage. I listened, my hammer paused mid-swing, the forge's heat heavy between us. Her story wasn't mine, but it echoed something deep within me, regrets I'd buried long ago. I told her nothing of my own life. I never do. But her presence was stirring memories I'd fought to forget. The town's whispers grew louder, and I knew time was running out. I caught myself watching her more, wondering what kind of life she'd left behind. My shop, once my refuge, now felt like a cage. By the week's end, I noticed strangers in town, men in fine coats, asking questions at the tavern. They weren't locals, and their presence set my nerves on edge. Eliza saw them too, from the window, and her face paled. She begged me not to turn her away, her voice breaking with desperation. I didn't promise anything. I've learned promises are chains. But I let her stay, teaching her to stoke the fire, to keep her hands busy. Her gratitude was quiet, shown in small acts like mending my old coat. I didn't want her thanks. I wanted my solitude back. Yet, each day she stayed, I felt the weight of her trust. The forge's rhythm faltered, my focus slipping. I was protecting her, but at what cost? The townsfolk began to notice my odd behavior, locking the door, dismissing customers early. They didn't suspect Eliza yet, but their eyes lingered on my shop. I told her we needed a plan, but she had none, only fear. I started working late, keeping the forge lit to deter visitors. Eliza helped, her hands steadier now, learning the craft with surprising ease. I caught myself teaching her more than I intended, explaining the tempering of steel. Her questions grew sharper, as if she saw the forge as more than a hiding place. I didn't admit it, but her presence was changing me. The silence I'd cherished felt empty when she wasn't near. But danger was closing in, and I knew we couldn't hide forever. One night, a man came knocking, his voice loud and demanding. He claimed to be Eliza's brother, sent to bring her home. I didn't open the door, but his words carried a threat I couldn't ignore. Eliza hid in the loft, her breathing shallow as she listened. I told the man I worked alone, my voice steady despite my racing heart. He left, but I knew he'd return. After he was gone, Eliza told me he wasn't her brother, just a hired man. Her fear was real, but so was her resolve. She spoke of starting over, somewhere far from here. For the first time, I wondered if I could leave this town too. The thought scared me more than the man at my door. I started planning, something I hadn't done in years. I had savings, enough to get us both out of town, but leaving meant abandoning the life I'd built. Eliza noticed my hesitation and asked about my past, her eyes searching mine. I deflected, focusing on the forge, but her questions lingered. The town was closing in, the searches growing bolder. I taught Eliza to disguise herself, cutting her hair and dressing her in my old clothes. She looked like a boy, but her eyes betrayed her. We worked in silence now, both aware of the ticking clock. I didn't want to care for her, but I did. The forge's heat couldn't burn away that truth. I was no longer just the blacksmith. The next day, I caught a boy spying through the window, his face pressed against the glass. He ran before I could grab him, but I knew he'd talk. Eliza and I worked through the night, preparing to leave. I packed tools, clothes, and what little money I had. She watched me, her expression a mix of gratitude and guilt. I told her we'd head north, to a town where no one knew us. The plan was risky, but staying was worse. As dawn broke, I extinguished the forge for the first time in decades. The silence was deafening, a void where my life had been. Eliza took my hand, her touch a promise I wasn't ready for. We slipped out the back, the town still asleep. My heart pounded, but I didn't look back. The forest road was treacherous, slick with mud from the recent rains. Eliza stayed close, her steps quick and silent despite her fear. I carried the weight of our supplies, my hammer slung across my back like a soldier's rifle. We traveled by night, avoiding the main paths where searchers might lurk. I knew these woods better than most, having hunted here in my youth. Eliza asked questions to fill the silence, about the stars, the trees, anything but our destination. I answered sparingly, my mind on the road ahead. Her presence was a comfort, though I'd never admit it. By dawn, we found a cave to rest in, hidden by vines. I wondered if I'd ever swing a hammer again. In the cave, Eliza opened up about her life before the wedding. She spoke of a controlling family, a fiancé who saw her as property. Her voice trembled, but her eyes were fierce. I listened, my hands idle for the first time in years. Her story stirred memories of my own, a sister lost to a bad marriage, a family I'd left behind. I didn't share them. Some wounds don't heal by talking. Instead, I taught her to start a fire without flint, a skill she picked up quickly. The cave felt like a temporary home, but danger wasn't far. I heard hoofbeats in the distance, a reminder we weren't safe. Eliza's hand brushed mine, and I didn't pull away. We moved deeper into the forest, the trees closing around us like a shield. Eliza's strength surprised me. She carried her share without complaint. I began to see her not as a burden, but as a partner. We spoke little, but our silences were companionable now. I taught her to track, to read the land, skills I'd learned as a boy. She absorbed them eagerly, her mind sharp despite her exhaustion. At night, we'd sit by a small fire, her head resting against my shoulder. I told myself it was just necessity, but my heart said otherwise. The town felt like a distant memory, its hold on me weakening. But I knew they'd never stop looking for her. One morning, we stumbled across an abandoned cabin, its roof sagging but intact. It was a risk, but we needed shelter from the coming snow. Inside, we found old tools and a rusted stove, remnants of a life someone else had fled. Eliza cleaned while I repaired the door, our movements synchronized like a dance. She hummed as she worked, a melody I didn't recognize but couldn't forget. For the first time, I imagined a life beyond the forge, with her. But the hoofbeats returned, closer now, and I knew our time was short. I hid our tracks, praying the snow would cover what I couldn't. Eliza's trust in me was a weight I wasn't sure I could bear. The cabin became our refuge, but it was no home. We kept the fire low, the smoke barely visible against the gray sky. Eliza asked about my family, her curiosity relentless. I told her bits and pieces, a mother who loved to sing, a father who drank too much. She listened without judgment, her hand resting on mine. I wanted to tell her more, but the words stuck in my throat. Outside, the world was closing in. I heard voices now, not just hoofbeats. Eliza suggested we split up, to throw them off, but I refused. I'd lost too much to lose her too. The cabin's walls felt thinner each day, our safety an illusion. One night, Eliza woke me, her face pale in the moonlight. She'd heard footsteps outside, circling the cabin. I grabbed my hammer, its weight familiar in my hand. We stayed still, barely breathing, until the sounds faded. In the morning, I found tracks, boots, not hooves, too close for comfort. Eliza was shaken but resolute. She wanted to fight if it came to it. I admired her courage, but I knew we couldn't win against numbers. I started planning a new route, one that would take us across the river. It was dangerous, but staying was worse. Eliza packed our things, her hands steady despite the fear in her eyes. I realized I'd do anything to keep her safe. The river was swollen, its current fierce from the melting snow. Crossing it was our only chance to lose the trackers. I built a crude raft, using skills I hadn't touched in years. Eliza helped, her hands blistered but uncomplaining. We worked in silence, the urgency binding us closer. As we pushed off, the water roared around us, threatening to tear the raft apart. Eliza clung to me, her trust absolute. I steered with all my strength, the cold biting into my bones. We reached the other side, soaked but alive, and collapsed on the bank. For a moment we laughed, the sound foreign to my ears. But the trackers weren't far behind. We kept moving, the forest thinning as we neared the mountains. Eliza's strength was fading, her steps slower each day. I carried more of the load, my body aching but my resolve firm. She spoke less now, her eyes distant but determined. I told her stories of my childhood to keep her spirits up, tales of climbing trees and chasing rabbits. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. At night, we'd huddle together for warmth, her breath steady against my chest. I wondered if this was what love felt like, this fierce need to protect. The mountains loomed ahead, promising freedom but also danger. I didn't know if we'd make it, but I knew I'd try. One evening, we found a small village, its lights glowing like beacons. We needed supplies, but entering was a risk. I went alone, leaving Eliza hidden in the trees. The villagers were kind but curious, their questions too pointed. I bought what I could and left quickly, my heart pounding. When I returned, Eliza was gone, her tracks leading into the forest. Panic gripped me, worse than any I'd known. I followed, calling her name, my voice swallowed by the wind. I found her at a stream, washing her face, her eyes red from crying. She'd thought I'd left her, and the fear had broken her. I held her, promising I'd never leave, and meant it. The village had stirred something in Eliza. She spoke of staying, of blending in. I didn't trust it. The trackers were too close, their reach too long. But her hope was infectious, and I let myself imagine it. A new life, together, in a place where no one knew us. We scouted the village at night, watching from the shadows. It was small, with a forge of its own, rusted but usable. I could work again, I thought, and she could find peace. But as we watched, I saw a man in a fine coat, his face familiar from the town. He was asking questions, his voice carrying across the square. Eliza's hand tightened in mine. We couldn't stay, we had to keep running. The mountains were brutal, their paths steep and unforgiving. Eliza struggled, her breath ragged, but she refused to stop. I carried her when she faltered, my own strength stretched to its limit. We found a cave to rest in, its mouth hidden by boulders. Inside, we lit no fire, the cold seeping into our bones. Eliza spoke of her dreams, a small house, a garden, a life free from fear. I listened, my heart aching for what I couldn't promise. I told her about my own dreams, ones I'd buried with my hammer. A family, a home, a purpose beyond iron. Her eyes softened, and for a moment, we were just two people, not fugitives. But the world outside wouldn't let us forget. The trackers found our trail, their shouts echoing through the pass. We fled deeper into the mountains, the terrain our only ally. Eliza's fear returned, but so did her fire. She suggested doubling back, confusing them, a tactic born of desperation. I agreed, and we laid false tracks, circling through the rocks. It bought us time, but not much. At night, we huddled in a crevice, the stars our only light. Eliza whispered about her childhood, stories of running through fields, free and unafraid. I shared my own, of learning the forge from my father, his hands guiding mine. We were running out of time, but we were alive, together. One morning, we reached a high ridge, the world spread out below us. The view was breathtaking, but it showed us no escape. The trackers were close. I could feel their presence like a storm. Eliza took my hand, her grip firm, and said we'd face them together. I didn't want a fight, but I was ready. We found a narrow pass, a place to make a stand if needed. I taught her to use my hammer, its weight awkward in her hands. She laughed, a sound that cut through my fear. We prepared traps, rocks to roll, branches to trip. If they came, we'd make it costly. For the first time, I felt like her equal, not her protector. The trackers came at dawn, their voices sharp in the quiet. There were three, armed and confident, unaware of our traps. Eliza and I hid, watching as they stumbled into our snares. Rocks fell, men cursed, and one fled, injured. The others pressed on, their eyes scanning the pass. I signaled Eliza to stay hidden, but she shook her head, stepping out with me. We faced them, my hammer in hand, her defiance a weapon of its own. They demanded her return, calling her a thief, a disgrace. I called them worse, my voice steady. The standoff lasted moments, but it felt like years. They backed off, outnumbered by our resolve, but I knew they'd return. We didn't wait for them. We climbed higher, the air thin and sharp, our bodies pushed beyond exhaustion. Eliza's strength amazed me. She moved like someone reborn. At night, we found a ledge, the stars so close I could almost touch them. She spoke of freedom, of a life where no one hunted her. I wanted that life too, for both of us. I told her about my sister, how I'd failed to save her, how it drove me to this solitary life. Eliza listened, her hand on mine, and promised we'd save each other. The trackers were still out there, but they felt distant now. The mountains were ours, at least for tonight. Days blurred into weeks, the mountains both our prison and our freedom. We found streams to drink from, berries to eat, but hunger gnawed at us. Eliza's spirit never wavered. She'd joke about our grand adventure, making me smile despite myself. I taught her to read the stars, to navigate by their light. She taught me to hope, a lesson I'd forgotten. We avoided villages now, their warmth too risky. But we dreamed of one, a place where we could stop running. The trackers' presence faded, their trail cold, but I didn't trust it. Eliza's hand in mine was my anchor, her trust my strength. I wondered if this was what home felt like. One evening, we found a valley, its grass green even in the cold. A small settlement lay at its heart, smoke rising from chimneys. Eliza's eyes lit up, but I hesitated. We watched from a distance, seeing no sign of our pursuers. The forge's smoke called to me, a reminder of the life I'd left. Eliza suggested we try, just for a night, to feel human again. I agreed, my heart heavy with doubt. We approached at dusk, posing as travelers, my hammer hidden in my pack. The villagers welcomed us, their kindness a balm. But as we ate, I saw a man watching us, his face too familiar. We'd been found. We fled before dawn, the village's warmth a fleeting memory. The man followed, alone but relentless, his horse's hoofbeats a drum in the dark. Eliza ran beside me, her breath ragged but her eyes fierce. We lost him in the trees, but the fear lingered. I realized we'd never be free, not while her past hunted her. She sensed my thoughts and stopped, her hand on my chest. She said we could fight, not just run, and her words ignited something in me. We found a clearing, a place to make a stand. I built a fire, its light a beacon for our hunter. This time, we'd face him, together. He came at midnight, his voice calling Eliza's name like a curse. I stood with my hammer, Eliza at my side, her knife gleaming. He was alone, his arrogance his downfall. He spoke of her fiancé, of the shame she'd brought, but his words meant nothing. Eliza answered, her voice steady, claiming her freedom. I struck first, my hammer a warning, and he drew a blade. The fight was quick, brutal, and final. He fell, and we stood over him, breathing hard. Eliza took my hand, her eyes clear of fear. We buried him shallowly, the earth hiding our secret. For the first time I felt free, but at a cost. We left the valley, the mountains behind us, heading for a new horizon. Eliza walked with purpose, her wedding gown long gone, replaced by strength. I carried my hammer, its weight a reminder of who I was, and who I'd become. We spoke of a future, not as fugitives but as partners, building a life from the ashes of our pasts. The world was wide, and we'd find our place in it. I didn't know if the trackers would come again, but I knew we'd face them together. The forge was gone, but its fire burned in us. As dawn broke, we walked on, hand in hand, toward a life we'd forge ourselves. My silence was broken, and I was glad. If you enjoyed this tale, please subscribe to our channel for more stories of courage and redemption. Your support keeps these narratives alive.